So I just played my very first session of Daggerheart, and yeah, I have some thoughts. Some good and some that had me scratching my head. Today we're going to talk about this, and I'll give you some of my opinions. And to be fair, a lot of these opinions are completely subjective, and you might love something that I was only lukewarm about. Now, going into this, I knew I was getting something different from D&D. You know, more narrative with fewer math headaches. I had watched a few videos from some D&D creators that I love, including the wonderful video from Jenny D about Daggerheart character creation, which I'll put a link to down in the description below. So I had some idea what I was getting into, but you know, it's easier to understand once you've actually experienced it yourself. And the game did deliver on a different experience. Not a perfect experience and not without quirks, but it's like if D&D in a story game had a beautiful, chaotic love child who constantly asked, "What do you feel right now?" Let's roll. Daggerheart leans heavily into encouraging roleplay. In fact, it's baked into the system. Part of the character sheet is called Connections. Now, the game I played was only a one-shot, but this is where you'd concentrate on session 0 of a campaign. Each character has different questions they answer that allows you to build instant bonds or conflicts with other characters. My 3 were, I trust you with my life, I once considered you close, and I owe you a favor. Each of those questions I answered with the name of another party member, and it forced me to think about what type of backstory I had with them. These questions really had me thinking about how and why my character was journeying with these other characters. This is something that not only got me talking to this group of strangers that I was going to be spending the next few hours with, but I will be taking this, although somewhat tweaked version, to every role-playing game that I GM from now on. Because honestly, I think this should be in every tabletop RPG ever. Why start with strangers in a tavern when you can start with, oh yeah, we were once cursed together by a forest god? It's a long story. Ultimately, Daggerheart needs you to roleplay to work. Like the system basically turns to you and says, so what do you smell right now? Seriously, our GM asked us that during an exploration scene of a tavern, and suddenly we were describing the smells of a tavern for the sole reason of adding flavor.
What smell permeates the air throughout this place?
So let's talk about the most unique part of Daggerheart's system. Success and failure are collaborative. I don't just roll and pray to the dice gods. I roll, and sometimes that roll is a discussion with the GM as to what the roll means. It feels like the game invites you into a messy middle of storytelling, where you succeed because you failed a little, or fail heroically. It's the idea of failing forward on steroids, a subject I've talked about in another video about soft failing, which is right here. The way it works is you roll 2d12s and then add these 2 rolls together to get your total. One of these d12s is your hope die, and one is your fear die. I can succeed or fail with hope or fear. So for example, I can roll and add the 2 dice together to get 17 with hope or 17 with fear. Both might accomplish what I want to accomplish, but the simple explanation is that one gives me a resource to spend and one gives the GM a resource to spend. And although it didn't come up in the session I played, but rolling doubles is always a critical success, but grants neither hope nor fear. And also another thing, there's no initiative. I repeat, no initiative. Instead, the spotlight just shifts around the table like a theater kid in an improv troupe. Players can even tag in and say, hey, what if I go and swing my sword next while you distract the goblin with your weird bard dance? It's a very above the table collaboration, which I liked most of the time. I'm actually a little unsure about how I feel about it ultimately because I can see the potential risks with a bad GM or player at the table, But to be fair, I have problems with D&D's style initiative too, for the exact opposite reason. Often in D&D, you get in a situation where you rolled an initiative that doesn't put you in the best position to synergize with the rest of your party. And that just always seems a little goofy to me for a round where everyone does what they need to do in the same 6-second window. But no initiative, if the GM can keep it flowing right and with the right party, can be a good way to tell the story of combat. But in the wrong hands, it can be a potential nightmare. Either way, just a reminder that whether you enjoy your time at the table or not really boils down to the people you choose to spend your time with. Ultimately, the lack of initiative was freeing at times. I did miss the structure somewhat. There were moments where we weren't totally sure who should go next or how long a turn should last. It's not a deal breaker, but it did cause a couple of pauses in the action as we awkwardly tried to figure out who should speak next on Discord.
All right, who would like to go next?
I feel like this is part of the design philosophy of this game, because mechanically, Daggerheart is very light. It's one of the most uncrunchy tabletop RPGs I've seen. Ranges are even loose interpretations. There are things like melee, very close, close, far, and very far. Want to move somewhere? Well, if it's close, go for it. Want to go further? Roll agility. I didn't feel like I was trapped on a grid, but I felt I was like in a scene. And then there's the advantage-disadvantage system. It's not rolling twice. Instead, you get a d6 that either adds to or subtracts from your main roll. It's simple and easy to understand, which is not a word I usually associate with the phrase roll mechanics. Experience points are also wrapped in storytelling. Instead of just kill a monster, get XP, you look at 2 role-playing phrases tied to your character's core. And if you lived up to them, you grow. Not numbers, you. It's weirdly motivational, like a fitness tracker for emotional growth. This fits well into my GM style, as I almost always use milestone XP, but this might take some getting used to for more crunchier GMs. Speaking of which, let's talk about GM stuff. The GM is encouraged to ask leading questions to build the world through player input. What do locals do when you enter the town? What customs do you observe? It's a two-way street, and it made me feel like a co-writer of the world. That said, it does require a GM who's okay letting go of some control. Also, the GM can spend a fear die to keep the spotlight, which is cool, but I could see it getting awkward if overused. There's a balance to maintain, like seasoning your food with drama. Too much and it just tastes like salt. But again, if you follow this channel at all, I always talk about this type of collaborative storytelling between GM and players. So this is the part of Daggerheart that's music to my ears, frankly. One of my favorite moments came when I realized that I got to flavor my spell however I wanted. I had a spell do a literal U-turn midair, tag 2 enemies in one turn, taking out both, by the way. Spells just don't go 10-foot radius or 5-foot cube. If you want your spell to hit one creature and then do a flip and hit another creature 20 feet away, that's possible, if you have the ability that can facilitate that. You see this burst of magical energy burst forth from my hands and go through one creature and just explode it into a pile of bones, and then it whips around. It does like a U-turn in the air and then goes and hits the other creature and also explodes it into a pile of bones. And I have to say, that was pretty epic, honestly. That's the kind of vibe of Daggerheart. Less about rules learned and more about moments. Overall, I had a blast. Daggerheart isn't trying to be D&D. It's doing its own thing. It's messy in places and brilliant in others. But no matter what, it's overflowing with opportunities for storytelling because the storytelling is hard-coded into the structure of the game. It's a system that asks you not just what do you do, but why you do it, and maybe how it makes you feel. Would I play again? Absolutely. Would I recommend it to new players? Maybe. It depends on how comfortable they are with improv and narrative storytelling. But for a bunch of roleplay loving chaos gremlins like most of my groups, yeah. Daggerheart is a sandbox full of strange toys, and I'm excited to keep playing with them. Anyway, those are my thoughts. If you've played Daggerheart, let me know your experiences in the comments, especially if you figured out a less awkward sort of middle ground between initiative and no initiative. Let me give a shout out to my GM, Bar D McFly. He was great, and if you're looking to play Daggerheart, I'd recommend booking a session with him on startplaying.games. I'll put a link to his contact info in the description, and you can look up all the games he hosts. And if you want to play an adventure with me, I have a link to my startplaying.games profile down there as well. I'll have a list of all my upcoming adventures and also an upcoming campaign I'm planning on doing. Who knows? I might even start GMing some Daggerheart as well. Anyway, thanks for watching, and remember, next time your spell does a U-turn, make sure it's got flair. I'll see you in the next one.